Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Whale of a Birthday and Karate Island. I'd say that these are some more well-known episodes of Season 4. I know for sure that Whale of a Birthday has got some mixed reception, which often means that people talk about it more. As for Karate Island, I'm a little less sure if this episode is known or if it's just my own bias speaking, but I'll get there when I review the episode. As always, thank you for tuning into today's review, and let's just get right into it. Shit. If I thought that some of the last few episodes were divisive, then we've got another thing coming with this episode. While Whale of a Birthday is nowhere near as infamous as Good Neighbors, it isn't generally liked, or at least there's a significant portion of the fan base slash people who watch SpongeBob, because some people ain't fans, who dislike this episode a lot. But there's also a lot of people who do like this episode, me included. So I think I'm going to structure this review a little differently and just come out the gate talking about the bad things first. If I discuss the bad, I think it'll help demonstrate how the good of this episode redeems the bad qualities. Alright, so let me not beat around the bush here. The main bad part of this episode is that it's not super funny. Wait, what? I know that's what y'all are probably saying right now, and that you're probably thinking, hello, Mr. Krabs? To that I say I'll get to Mr. Krabs in a moment. But meanwhile, I want to talk about how Whale of a Birthday isn't super funny, which docks some points off of its score. While Whale of a Birthday never gets boring by any means, there are a lot of duller moments, like when SpongeBob is following Pearl around at the mall, though I will admit that there were some fun gags in this part, like the one with the seahorse, or the scene between Pearl and Mr. Krabs at the beginning, or when when Squidward and Mr. Krabs are setting up the Krusty Krab. None of these scenes are filled to the brim with great comedy, and they also aren't particularly engaging, so they're just kinda meh. But while the humor of the episode is an issue, it doesn't ruin the episode by any means because there's still plenty of jokes that work here. Like Squidward's entire performance of four-ply, or that moment in the beginning of the episode when Pearl jumps through the floor and Mr. Krabs is like, "You sure you don't want a room on the ground floor?" Or like the flashback of the previous parties Pearl has had. So, with the big issue I have with this episode out of the way, let's discuss the element of this episode a hell of a lot more people are interested in, Mr. Krabs. Prepare for a lot of thoughts about this character and how people receive this character. I won't mark this as a tangent since it is quite relevant, but still. Anyway, let me get to my point. I think people really overreact about Mr. Krabs in this episode. Yes, I agree that he does indeed start off this episode by being really unpleasant, which also sours the first part of Whale of a Birthday. However, Mr. Krabs is fine by the end of the episode, and I feel like people gloss over that. This episode is about his and Pearl's relationship, and while I wouldn't call what happens over the course of these 11 minutes an arc per se, I feel there's some kind of change in that relationship between the beginning and end of the episode. At the beginning of Whale of a Birthday, Mr. Krabs is crass and dismissive of Pearl and her birthday. Yeah, he's not winning any Father of the Year awards here when he forgets his daughter's birthday and age, and then later trying to be cheap as hell about the celebration for no good reason, but he's definitely not on the level of some of the worst fathers in animation, which people love to act like he is. Even if Mr. Krabs is trying to be cheap, he is at least trying to give her a birthday party that he thinks she'll enjoy. The problem is that he doesn't know his daughter and puts being cheap above going all out. Really, I think he thinks that Pearl wants to be as cheap as him. And now that I lay all this out, it's clear to me that this episode is one of those kinds of plots where a parent makes an endearing mistake regarding their child. It's just the execution didn't work well for many. But anyway, all of this is to say that Mr. Krabs having this false idea of his daughter makes his actions in this episode a lot more forgivable for me. And when Pearl runs off after seeing Mr. Krabs' cheap display, he goes after her immediately and at least tries to comfort her. Mr. Krabs is a selfish person, but he's not the absolute monster of a father that some people try to say he is. There's a gray area between Father of the Year and Worst Father Ever, and Mr. Krabs is right in that area. And let's not forget that Mr. Krabs sends SpongeBob to go get Pearl's gift, saying that nothing is too good for his daughter. And even with SpongeBob coming back with a lot of expensive gifts, he doesn't really react as negatively as you'd think based on how some people talk about this episode. Yeah, he's mad, but that anger almost entirely disappears when Pearl shows her happiness at the gifts, which I think is really cute. And when SpongeBob calls Mr. Krabs a good dad, all he says is don't push your luck. So I really do not have a problem with Mr. Krabs in this episode. I don't think he's any worse here than he was in Squeaky Boots, and that's all I have to say on that. So now I'll move on. Let's talk about the good. Well, firstly, I like that this is an episode focused on Pearl, because that has been long overdue. Last one we had was Bossy Boots, if I remember correctly. No matter how you feel about this character, she is still a main character, so her having such few episodes devoted to her is criminal. I've been telling y'all, it really does not look good for this show when it comes to girl and woman characters, but that's a conversation for another time. A time that will never come. But anyway, I like that this episode is about Pearl, and I like Pearl in this episode too. I like that she stands her ground with Mr. Krabs and is like, "You're not going to ruin my birthday this year." I'm not going to waste much energy addressing people who find Pearl annoying and spoiled because 99% of that criticism is just misogyny, so. Whale of a Birthday ends satisfyingly, with Pearl getting everything she wanted for her birthday. Yes, it was SpongeBob that did the legwork here, but it was still wholesome to me seeing Pearl express her joy at all the gifts towards Mr. Krabs anyway. I mean, technically, SpongeBob did all of this on Mr. Krabs' orders and dime, so. In general, Whale of a Birthday is just an enjoyable episode to watch. It's not hugely funny, but it is engaging, especially because it gets me invested in Mr. Krabs' and Pearl's relationship, and Pearl's birthday celebration, very quickly, so I want everything to turn out well, which does in the end. It's also just wholesome to me that it does, and that's why I like this episode, and that's why it's being put in my good tier, where it comes in with a score of 7.8 out of 10. If this episode was funnier, it would have been in great tier for sure, but I've got to have some kind of standards around here. Up next is Karate Island. This episode is very memorable for me. Not sure if I'd say this one crosses into the realm of nostalgia, but it is an episode that sticks out to me that I do have old memories with. Does that mean this episode is exceptionally good? Well, no, but it surely ain't a bad episode. So why don't I just get to talking about it so y'all can see what I mean. Now, of course, y'all already know I'm a fan of this beginning scene because my boy Gary is here. I cannot stress enough how much of a win it is when Gary appears in any significant capacity. But anyway, this first scene is fun and cute and has some great visual gags, and it helps set up the episode nicely with the mailman coming in while SpongeBob's cleaning Gary's shell. And then I love the dramatics as SpongeBob gets his mail and how absolutely tired the mailman is of SpongeBob. I feel like this is a decently frequent running, dynamic between the mailman and SpongeBob. I like it. I like it when SpongeBob is just a wee bit annoying, but not too much because then I just feel bad for him. I also like that this episode is about karate, as it has been a minute since we've seen SpongeBob and Sandy do karate or more action-oriented things like this. This episode coming so soon after Chimps Ahoy is nice too, because we're getting to see all these facets of Sandy. And I love how Sandy gives SpongeBob's ego no time when she rightfully says that her karate is better than his by a country mile. Gotta say, I love her Texasisms. And I will say that SpongeBob is kinda annoying in this first part of the episode. Not in the lovable weirdo way, but in the egotistical smug way, which is in character for him, so I'm not upset in that way. I also know that SpongeBob getting all egotistical like this is very much intentional. I oscillate between being able to ignore it and being legitimately annoyed by his behavior, so not a great look for SpongeBob or the episode. And, I get it. It's really hard to make main characters egotistical for an episode without them feeling really annoying to me, but dang, I wish they'd get it right. At least this was in character for SpongeBob, something I now recognize, which I did not when I originally wrote the review of this episode, so if you check the written review out, just note that I was a little wrong there. Anyway, I really like Sandy in this episode, because of what I already said about her taking no shit and seeing her different facets, and also her concern for SpongeBob, despite his annoying ego. Also, her Texasisms were on point this episode. Not that anyone from Texas talks like that, but they were pleasing to listen to. Also, I find it funny that Texas is always used as the epitome of a southern state when the way Sandy talks feels more like something you'd see in Mississippi or Alabama, but I suppose I could think of a few different reasons why this show might have chosen Texas. I love when Karate Island takes a turn with SpongeBob getting chained to his throne and Master Udon taking a pen out menacingly. From here, the episode improves greatly, since SpongeBob's ego is completely removed from the picture. And more importantly, this is when Sandy comes back to save SpongeBob, which gives us all sorts of entertaining action sequences where Sandy kicks ass. Also, I like how her plan before doing that was to literally swim, or maybe walk, back to Bikini Bottom. I also love that Sandy, without a single explanation, though it is lampshaded later, waltzes right into the building looking like the bride from Kill Bill. Given that this episode premiered kind of close to when Kill Bill came out, I'm wondering if the kids watching understood that reference, especially considering that isn't Kill Bill rated R? I guess the reference was for the adults. Also, I love how the Cosmic Shake heavily referenced this episode. I also love the fight scenes that Sandy has with the Tickler, Lip Service, clever name by the way, and Filthy Phil. All of these fights contain excellent instances of puns and one-liners, and they have the kind of campy action atmosphere that I love to see. Each fight also has some fun moments that I love. With the Tickler, I absolutely love the delivery on the Jelly Donuts line. I also think it's hilarious that Jelly Donuts are the Tickler's weakness. And then with Lip Service, the chapped lip solution is genius, and I love the way that the lips just break off. And then on the theme of smart writing, I love that Sandy was unaffected by Filthy Phil due to her air helmet. And then once Sandy breaks through and gets to SpongeBob, I love how it turns out that this whole thing was a scheme for real estate. The reveal is just so random and absurd and a non sequitur that it's inherently hilarious. All expectations are shattered here, and I adore it. And I also think it's yet another one of those jokes that's funnier the older you are. I love how this episode gives no shits about going straight into legit real estate talk that I don't understand. And then, of course, we have the final fight where both Master Udon and Sandy become super buff for no reason, like this is an episode of Dragon Ball Z. Well, Sandy's been buff, as we've seen in Muscle Bob Buff Pants, but y'all know what I mean. The ending of this episode is great too. I like that we see a resolution of SpongeBob's annoying ego in this episode by him apologizing and paying for his actions, given that he almost fell for a real estate scheme. And then I love how when SpongeBob and Sandy are leaving, Sandy starts getting into a lecture about real estate. Please, Sandy, not you. Don't be a capitalist. And then we, of course, have the last bit of the episode where Squidward suddenly shows up out of nowhere talking about being the king of clarinets while Master Udon looks on menacingly despite having just fell into the ocean. I guess the spirit of capitalism cannot be stopped. That makes me wonder, how the hell did these people know that SpongeBob and Squidward were into karate and clarinet respectively? They stalking people? I guess Squidward's hobby is potentially well known, and at least in Karate Choppers and No Weenies Allowed, SpongeBob and Sandy were sparring in public. So maybe that's why. Or maybe there's no explanation and I'm overthinking once more. Karate Island is a fun, action-packed episode. It starts off a bit weak with SpongeBob's ego getting kinda annoying, especially once we reach the island, but that element does get resolved rather quickly once Master Udon stops with the pretense. The rest of Karate Island is spent with Sandy and her very entertaining fights, and we got a pretty good ending. So I think that overall this episode fits nicely into my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.5 out of 10. As always, gotta end the video with some closing thoughts of mine. Well, I expounded quite a bit on my thoughts on Mr. Krabs, which would normally be the kind of thing that I put into these closing thoughts, but it felt especially relevant for my review of Whale of a Birthday, because y'all, I'm tired. I don't know, one thing I cannot stand is people calling characters bad parents when they truly are not. I'm not sure why that specific misunderstanding bothers me so much. Maybe because it's a symptom of the kind of black and white thinking in fandom spaces that irritates me? I don't know. But like Mr. Krabs, Goku, Camilla from the Owl House, which that last one is literally just racism and misogyny. I'd say misogynoir if Camilla actually looked black, but anyway. Like, these characters are just some of the examples of characters that I've had to defend because of a lack of nuanced takes, especially Goku. I think another reason the misunderstanding of Mr. Krabs specifically irritates me is because it's the same kind of nonsense peddled by season 1 through 3 dick riders. Like, people love talking about how Mr. Krabs became worse to Pearl and wasn't like this in the first 3 seasons, like Squeaky Boots wasn't an episode. And also, the reason why people can make this argument is because we saw Mr. Krabs and Pearl interact like 3 times in the first 3 seasons. Say what you will about the show, but at least it's getting increasingly better at handling its misogyny problem, which means we have actual material to work with when it comes to discussing the characters of Pearl and Karen. As you can see, I could really be here all day talking about this topic, so I'm gonna back off. I don't really have anything else I want to say about Karate Island, other than I'm working on accepting that SpongeBob has bad traits. By that, I mean that before I used to think it was out of character when SpongeBob was smug or egotistical, but nah, that's definitely a part of his character. I know people tend to hate on Mary Sue's or whatever, which, by the way, that's also misogyny, but I'm perfectly fine with characters that are perfectly nice and kind with no selfishness or ego. Like, I literally adore characters like that. I don't know what to tell you. And I think with that, I'm going to leave you all for the end of this video, and I will see you all in the next review.